There's a classroom somewhere in Bihar right now. 40 children, one teacher, 5 different grade levels, all in the same room, all at the same time. The teacher is also responsible for maintaining attendance registers, distributing midday meals, conducting government surveys, and managing school records. By the end of the year, some of those 40 students won't come back ever. Not because they wanted to leave, but because the system gave them no reason to stay. And this is not a rare exception. This is not an outlier from a forgotten corner of India. According to a report released just days ago by NITI Aayog, India's own premier policy institution, this is the everyday reality of school education in a country that calls itself as a rising superpower. The numbers in that report are not projections. They are not even estimates. They are data. Hard, source, documented data. And they are actually genuinely very, very shocking. Let's start with what India actually is educationally. See, India operates 14.71 lakh schools, serving around 24.69 crore students. That is the largest school education system in the entire world. Not second largest, not the third largest, but the largest. And yet, India's gross enrollment ratio at higher secondary school level just 58.4%, which means that out of every 100 children who start school, fewer than 60 are still enrolled by the time they reach class 11th and 12th. Dropout rates rise sharply after elementary education in our country. While primary level dropout has fallen to 0.3% nationally, it increases to 3.5% at upper primary, jumps to 11.5% at the secondary stage. 11.5%. This is more than 1 in every 10 students dropping out at the secondary stage alone. Now here is why this affects you directly. Wherever you are in India, India is sitting on the world's largest youth population. We call it as demographic dividend. The idea that millions of young Indians entering the workforce will power economic growth for the next 3 decades. But that dividend converts to growth only if these young people, they're educated, they're skilled, and they're employable. And right now, the institution responsible for doing that conversion, the school, is by the government's own admission failing at a systematic level. This is not a crisis of access. India has largely solved that. It is a crisis of quality, crisis of continuity and outcomes. In the NITI Aayog's report, which was released on May 6, 2026, puts every single number on table. Let's talk about the learning outcomes first, because everything else is context. The only question that matters about a school is that are children actually learning anything inside it? The answer, according to the data, is not enough, not even close. See, ASR 2024 report, the annual status of education report, which is the most widely cited independent survey of learning levels in India, found that only 27% of grade 3 students could read a grade 2 level text. Only 31% of grade 5th students could solve a basic division problem. A grade 5th student is 10 years old. They have been in school for 5 years and 7 out of 10 of them cannot do a division problem which is taught in grade 3rd. It gets worse as you go up. Reading proficiency amongst grade 8 students has declined from 74.7% in 2014 to 71% in 2024 for students who could read a grade 2 text. In mathematics, only 45.8% of grade A students can solve a basic division problem. See, we are spending 8 years educating children, and at the end of it, more than half of them, they cannot solve a division problem. Then what is our purpose of teaching them? Now here is the part that most people assume is the solution: private schools. Millions of Indian parents, they have moved their children out of the government schools into the low-fee private schools, convinced that the fee signals quality. See, the report found that 35% of the class 5th students in low-fee private schools, they cannot read a class 2 textbook, while 60% are unable to solve a basic division problem. The private schools for most Indian families is not a solution. It is an expensive version of the same problem. And why are the learning outcomes so poor? You have to go to the teacher to answer to that. Data from NITI Aayog's Saath-E program found that many teachers score below 60 to 70% in subject papers of the grades they teach. Only 10 to 15% of the candidates appearing for CTET and states TETs score above the 60% qualifying threshold. The test that qualifies a teacher to teach, only 10 to 15% of those who attempted are passing it with a score of 60%, and yet teachers are still being deployed. Average marks in primary level mathematics, it hovers around 46%. 46%. A teacher who scores 46% in maths is teaching mathematics to children. That is the system as it currently exists. I don't need to tell you more. Now let's talk about the structural problems, because the learning outcome in this crisis doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is produced by specific set of conditions, and those conditions are extraordinary. So around 1.04 lakh schools, over 7% of all all the schools operate with just one teacher. 7% of those schools operate with just one teacher. Again, one teacher, multiple grades, multiple subjects, multiple children. Nearly 14% of the planned teaching days are lost to non-academic works, such as elections, such as surveys. And across the country, India has approximately 1.01 crore teachers, but significant shortfall persists, particularly in rural and undeserved areas. Bihar alone has around 2.08 lakh vacancies at the elementary level, besides 36,035 vacancies in secondary school and 33,035 in senior secondary school. Bihar alone, one state, 2.7 lakh teacher vacancies across the schooling system. And who is attending schools in these conditions? More than one-third of the schools in India, they have fewer than 50 students, with many functioning with minimal infrastructure and minimal staff. Now that is not a small school, that is a failing institution being kept alive on paper while delivering nothing of value to the children inside it. And then there are schools that have given up entirely. Additionally, approximately 8,000 schools reported zero student enrollment, with the highest number in West Bengal with 3,812 and Telangana with 2,245. Nearly 8,000 schools, no students, but still on the register, still consuming administrative resources, still counted as a part of India's school system. Now here is the infrastructure data, and that is where it becomes impossible to look away. According to UDISE Plus 2024-2025, 1.19 lakh schools, no electricity, while 99% of the schools now have drinking water facilities. 14,500 schools still lack functional water resources, and nearly 59,800 schools, they lack hand washing facilities. 1.19 lakh schools with no electricity in 2026 in a country that launched Chandrayaan 3 to the moon South Pole. And then there is a digital access problem, which is perhaps the most consequential infrastructure gap of all for the future. The NITI Aayog report calls for linking PM E-Vidya, BharatNet and PM Gati Shakti to create a digital public infrastructure for education. But the gap between aspiration and reality is enormous, because a foundational requirement for digital learning is electricity, and 1.19 lakh schools, they do not have that yet. And here is the structural data point that binds all of this together. Only about 5% of schools in India offer continuous education from grade 1 to grade 12. Only 5% of schools in India offering continuous education from grade 1 to grade 12, which means the other 95% are organized as separate institutions. Primary school separate, upper primary separate, secondary separate, and senior secondary schools separate. Each a different building, different administration, different management. A child growing up in a government school system is forced to change schools multiple times before reaching class 12, and each transition is actually a dropout risk. A child who has to walk further to a new school, navigate a new system, deal with an unfamiliar environment, that child is more likely to not come back. And that is exactly what the data shows. The gross enrollment ratio at the higher secondary level stands at just 58.4% nationally. Bihar is 38.1%, Meghalaya 39%, Nagaland again 39.8%, Assam at 43.5%. They are amongst the worst performing states in our country with respect to gross enrollment ratio. Now in Bihar, fewer than 4 out of every 10 children of the higher secondary age are actually enrolled in a higher secondary school. That is not a statistic. That is millions of futures foreclosed before they even began. And here is the data point that reveals how completely the system has lost public trust. See, the government school enrollment, they have fallen from 71% in 2005 to 49.24% in 2024-2025, while private schools now account for 44.01% of all the secondary institutions. So basically, 20 years ago, 71% of Indian children went to government schools. Today, it is under 50%. Parents, including poor parents who can barely afford it, are paying fees to escape government schools. They are voting with their feet, and the government's own report confirms they have good reasons to. See, this NITI Aayog report is not only a diagnosis, it proposes specific structural reforms. Let's go through what's actually on the table, because the ambition here is very significant. The single biggest structural recommendation is what the report calls the cylindrical model of schooling. Right now, India's school structure is a pyramid structure. Many primary schools at the bottom, fewer upper primary schools in the middle, and very few secondary and senior secondary schools at the top. Children fall out at each transition, and the proposed solution is composite schools that cover grade 1 to grade 12 under one single roof. One institution, one administration, one continuous journey, no forced transition, no dropout triggers built into the structure itself. The report also recommends creating school complexes under National Education Policy of 2020. One secondary school anchoring a cluster of nearby primary schools and Anganwadis within 5 to 10 kilometer radius, sharing teachers, labs, libraries, sports facilities, and digital resources. On teacher quality, the report calls for moving away from the lecture-based training school sessions to sustained practice-centered professional development. It proposes a structured career pathway for senior teacher, master teacher, mentor teacher to make teaching a profession with progression, not just a job with a government salary. So on finance aspect, the report is explicit. India should increase public expenditure on education to 6% of the GDP from the current level of around 4.6%. This should definitely happen. The gap between 4.6% and 6% is enormous in absolute terms. India's GDP is now the world's 6th largest GDP. Moving education spending from 4.6 to 6% of that GDP would mean hundreds of thousands of crores of additional annual investment in the country. See, the report is saying very plainly, what are we spending now is not enough. And on the name for all of it, NITI Aayog has wrapped its entire reform framework under a proposed mission called Sushikshit Bharat Abhiyan. Now, the report language on this is unambiguous. Incremental change will not be sufficient. Meeting the aspirations of the resurgent India will demand a system-wide transformation of the school system in the country. System-wide transformation, not repair, not adjustment, but transformation. Now, here is what I want you to take from everything you have just heard. India has spent the last 25 years solving the access problem. We built schools in every village. We launched midday meal programs. We passed the Right to Education Act also. We increased enrollment from a fraction of children to near universal coverage at the primary level. And by the metrics we used at the time, schools built, children enrolled, we actually succeeded. No doubts about that, but we asked the wrong question. We should have asked, are children learning anything when they get there? Because the data now shows that a child who goes to school for 5 years and still cannot read a class 2 textbook has not received an education. They have received the attendance, they have received an attendance record of education, but the form without the substance. And this distinction between enrollment and learning is not a technicality. It is a difference between a demographic dividend and a demographic disaster. It is a difference between 24 crore students becoming the engine of a developed India by 2047 or 24 crore young people entering adulthood without the skills to participate in the economy that India is trying to build. See, NITI Aayog's own report says it plainly. India has got 24.69 crore children in schools. Only 27% of grade 3 students can read at a grade level. Only 45.8% of grade 8 students can do a basic division, and only 58.4% of the children are still enrolled at the higher secondary stage. See, the system is leaking children at every age, and what remains of the system not being taught well enough, and what remains of the system is not being taught well enough. So here is the line I want you to carry from this video. India solved the problem of getting children into schools. It has not yet solved the problem of making schools worth going to. Now, before I leave you, I want to put one genuinely hard question on the table. India has had education policy after education policy. The National Curriculum Framework, Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, Right to Education Act, National Education Policy 2020, and now a NITI Aayog report proposing a Sushikshit Bharat Abhiyan. Each generation of reform identified the same problems: dropout rates, poor learning outcomes, teacher vacancies, infrastructure gaps, digital divides. And here we are in 2026 with NITI Aayog documenting using hard data from UDISC plus ASCR 2024, PARC 2024, and its own Sathi program that those same problems are still here. In some cases, worse. Reading proficiency at grade 8 declined between 2014 and 2024. Government school enrollment ratio fell from 71 to 49% in 2 decades. The diagnoses have been right, the prescriptions have been right, but the implementation has been the problem. And so here's my question to you. An honest answer in the comments, not a patriotic one. When a government body like NITI Aayog releases a report that says 1.19 lakh schools have no electricity, around 8,000 schools have 0 students, only 10 to 15% of the teacher candidates are passing their own qualification test, and this is in 2026 after decades of educational reform and spending, what exactly needs to change for implementation to finally match aspiration? Is it money? India is spending 4.6% of the GDP on education. Is it political will? Is it administrative capacity at the state level? Is it accountability? The absence of any real consequences for schools that fail their students year after year? Because right now, 24.69 crore Indian children are inside a system that NITI Aayog itself says is not working well enough. And the report proposing solutions will join a long shelves of previous reports processing solutions. The children in those classrooms cannot wait for the next report. Think about it. We need to act quickly. I hope you enjoyed the session. Do let me know your views in the comment section. All the very best. Have a beautiful day. Thank you.